Good evening and welcome to the fifth and final in a series of political forums being held for the candidates who are running for office on November 5th here at Cayuga Community College. This forum is hosted by the college as well as the Citizen and ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On November 5th, the voters in the city of Auburn can vote for two candidates to serve on the Auburn City Council that is currently divided among 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. This year, incumbents Councilors William Graney and Matthew Smith are seeking their 3rd terms. Councilor Graney is not able to join us. He is on the conservative line, and Councilor Smith is on the Republican, conservative, and independent lines. They are challenged this year by Debbie McCormick, Terry Cuddy, and Christopher DeAngelis. Ms. McCormick and Mr. Cuddy are both on the Democratic and Working Families lines, but also have an independent line, the Auburn First Party. Mr. DeAngelis, who is the former mayor of the city of Auburn and a member of City Council in the 1990s, is on the Republican and independent lines. Voters in Auburn can vote for up to 2 candidates, and the 2 top vote getters will be joining council or returning to council on January 1st. The candidates are all but one is here with us. We're delighted to have them in the studio. Prior to taping, we asked them to draw lots to see who would be going first and giving their opening statements of 2 minutes. They'll reverse that order at the end. They're here in the order they will be making their opening statements. And first we have Debbie McCormick, who is on the Democratic, Working Families Party, and Auburn First Party. Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for having us here today and giving everyone an opportunity to get to know us better. First of all, in case anyone isn't aware yet, I've most recently been city clerk for the last 13 years. I've lived in Auburn all my life, except for a few years living in Virginia when my husband was in the Navy, which gave me a even better appreciation for what we have here in Auburn. But the most recent time that I've spent here in Auburn has been as city clerk, and it's given me an front row seat to what goes on at City Hall and how city government works and how City Council works. And I've had an opportunity to see how things go well and how things don't work so well. I've sat through about 650 City Council meetings with about 9 city councilors and 3 different mayors. I think that over time I've realized that right now the city is at a crossroads. We've got an opportunity to go in the right direction, but I'm afraid that if we continue on the same road that we're on now, we're not going to go in the right direction for the city of Auburn for the future. And that's why I decided to jump in the ring here and try to win your confidence and become the next city councilor for the city of Auburn. I believe that I have the knowledge, I have a great awareness of the difficulties that face the city, more so than I've ever had in my life because of my job. And I'm a taxpayer, a homeowner, and I really would like the opportunity to serve as city councilor and help bring Auburn back onto the right path and succeed along with all the other great things that are happening here in Auburn now.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mr. DeAngelis, who's on the Republican and Independent lines. Mr. DeAngelis.
Thank you, Guy, and I'd like to thank everyone here at the college who works so hard to put these programs on and for providing us an opportunity to share our thoughts with the people of the city of Auburn tonight. I have served in elected office in the past. I've served as a county legislator. I've served as a city councilor and as mayor of the city of Auburn. I feel honored to have been chosen by the people in the past to serve in those capacities. When I left the mayor's office in 1999, December of 1999, I was provided with another opportunity to go to work for the state. I was appointed to what was then called the Governor's Office for Small Cities. It was the state administration of the Community Development Block Grant Program. That afforded me an opportunity as one of 8 program administrators to work with counties, cities, towns, and villages throughout the state and to help them with their issues, same issues that we're facing as a community. In recent years, I've paid closer attention to what's happening in city government. Our city, the health of our city, our financial condition, really is in critical condition. And I think that I can use my experience to help turn that situation around. I am seeking support from people of the City of Auburn to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndres. We'll now hear from Matthew Smith, who's an incumbent. He's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines.
Thank you, Guy. I too would like to thank Jeremy Boyer and the Citizen, along with the staff here at Cayuga Community College, along with you, Guy, for putting on this forum. I think it's important for us as elected officials or potential elected officials to be able to explain to you why we want to be your public servant. For 8 years, I have been honored to be your public servant. And for 8 years, I have given you everything that I have. I've been the conscience of City Hall. Okay, and I've ran this whole campaign the same way that I've been running for office the last 8 years, unshackled by the special interests within the city. I am bound to no one but to you, the taxpayers. You know, we've seen throughout this campaign, my opponents have run on the platform of platitudes. I've run on a platform of accomplishments, a platform of cutting taxes, keeping the tax base at a reasonable rate. I've run on the platform of cutting spending. You know, recently, as I was walking the streets, I had one elderly woman say to me, and she grabbed my face, and she said, "Counselor, I can't afford my home. Counselor, I don't have much of a family left in this community anymore. We need this city to be affordable." And that's been the crux of my whole campaign, making Auburn an affordable future. I don't owe anyone a thing in this community other than you, the taxpayers. No union, no other special interest. I'm here to make this city affordable for both young and old. And that's my conviction. For 8 years, I have replaced the political rhetoric, the flab of political rhetoric, with the muscle of conviction. And I will continue to do so for these next 4 years. It has been my honor to serve you, and I'm asking you on November 5th to give me the ability to serve you for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. We'll now hear from Terry Cuddy, who is on the Democratic Working Families in Auburn First Line. Mr. Cuddy.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Jeremy. I'd also like to thank Citizen, the telecom department at CCC, which I am an alum of, ARMA, and I would like to introduce myself as a lifelong resident of Auburn. My wife, Beth Beer-Cuddy, is a librarian at Seward School. I have a son, John, who's 3 years old, and I currently work at Cayuga Onondaga BOCES as a career and tech teacher. There, I prepare students for the workforce and college. I also collaborate with business and industry and post-secondary schools to determine what kind of skills and knowledge they need to succeed in the future. I'm running for city council because I see that the current council is somewhat broken. I see a failed energy contract that is draining the city to $1 million a year. We need to get our fiscal house in order. The one thing that we need to do is to try to get out of that contract as fast as possible. Either buy the contract out or try to find another means to see the terms of that contract and if they were done in a not favorable way or fair way to Auburn. Secondly, I'd like to begin a new page of collaboration and coordination with the county, the towns, and the school district. The current council seem to have had situations where talks have broken down. I don't want to have that be my tenure on council. Also, I want to make Auburn a destination. I want to build the kinds of businesses that will bring sales tax revenue to the city, and I want to see the development that started downtown come to fruition so that we can begin to see a new era in Auburn. I'm asking for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. You'll now have questions over the next roughly about an hour, a little over an hour and 10 minutes from Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer can ask the questions of any of you or all of you individually, and if you want a rebuttal, just give me a signal and we'll give you once per round. Beyond that, it's at my discretion, so we keep this moving because we do have a lot of candidates. Timing is being done by Michael, who is a second-year student here at the college. Mr. Boyer, welcome.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for coming today and participating in this exercise. I think it'll be a great tool for helping voters to get some more information. We'll start right in with what has been one of the biggest issues that the council faced in the past year, and that was the budget for the fire department. When the budget was passed, the decision was made to eliminate 10 positions. Some of them had to be layoffs of people that were in those positions. And I just want to know from the 4 people here today, evaluate whether they think that was the right decision or not.
Okay, this is for all 4.
Yep.
So we'll start with Ms. McCormick and go all the way down.
Okay,
You have 2 minutes.
thank you. No, I don't think it was the right decision. It was a last-minute, unplanned decision, as much of what happens recently in the last few years on city council. If you're going to downsize a department, you plan ahead. You don't downsize, then make a plan. I think that it just speaks to the problem that I see as council not looking forward, not working with the city manager, trying to micromanage the budget process altogether. They talk about cutting jobs, but actually jobs are people. And in the city government, people are services. All of our services are provided by people, whether it's getting your trash picked up at the curb, whether it's a crossing guard crossing your kindergartner to go to school, whether you're calling to find out something about your water bill. There's a person attached to everything we do with the city. So by cutting jobs, you're really cutting people. Or by cutting people, you're cutting jobs, which equates to me to services. So what we're doing with this city council is cutting citizen services without a plan on how to supplement or provide the service. You can't provide certain services without the people. And it's just evidence of the poor planning. Right now, we're spending $60,000 a month in overtime for the fire department because they had no plan. So the fire department has had the layoffs, but we're still paying $60,000 non-budgeted money for overtime.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. DeAngelo, should have 2 minutes on this issue of the fire department and budget cuts.
I believe that the decision that was made, in fact, was a last-minute decision in a very difficult budget process. I don't think there was any reason for that to be the case. There were indicators the year before with regard to the city's financial situation. And in fact, there were people in other departments that were laid off in the previous year's budget. Now, why I believe that the decision was an irresponsible decision is because it will, I think, ultimately, it has the potential ultimately to cost the city more money in the long run than any money that was any savings that were envisioned. Currently in a legal proceeding involving the fire union and the city, that still has to be worked out. Typically, these decisions that are made when communities go down this path end up costing money in the end. So I believe that this could have been handled in a much different way. I believe we're going to end up sitting at the table and trying to work out the solution to this problem. And the solution should be a long-term sustainable solution, not one that's made at the last minute that ends up costing the taxpayers more money in the end.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelo. Councilor Smith, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue.
Thank you. There was nothing last minute about making these decisions. Okay, as a counselor, you must come to each budget doing your homework. Now, I had the statistics done of what other cities are doing well before the budget time. All right, and taking a look at those statistics, you look at cities and how they run their fire departments. My opponents think that this is the only way to run a fire department. We have a fire department that costs us between $7 to $8 million. Folks, we bring in $11 million in property taxes. So 80% of just what we bring in property taxes goes towards the fire department. We need to downsize. Our department needs to match the size of our ability to pay. Now, it's politically expedient for my opponents to say, listen, it's the wrong thing to do because the fire department's a very politically active union within the city. You need political courage to make change. This is the status quo. The minimum manning is what's killing us. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that we have to pay because of minimum manning. We had an opportunity this year to go after the minimum manning. Our labor attorney, highly regarded labor attorney, so that we have the opportunity now to go after the minimum manning and win in court. We're going to do that. Now, politically, it would have been easier for me to avoid that and say, as Mr. DeAngelo has said, let's cut a deal. But bottom line is, when you cut deals, it's the taxpayers who get left out. I'm here to serve you and to make the tough decisions, and I'm willing to suffer the ramifications of those difficult decisions. There's no IOU on Matt Smith's back here. These 3 individuals have IOUs, and it's going on your credit card. There's nothing last minute. I've done the research. I've looked at the numbers from other departments. When we have a department just with lieutenants alone costs us $800,000 in salaries, and that's not including the pension. That's not including the overtime. Something's wrong. We need to right-size our city government, and that's every department. It doesn't matter how popular one department is. No one should be immune from downsizing that all the other departments have had to do.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Cuddy, on this issue of the Auburn Fire Department and the budget. And you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Councilor Smith, I've done some research too on statistics. Councilor Smith likes to refer to other cities. He's brought up the city of Elmira as a model. I would like to let the people of Auburn know that on average per year, Elmira Fire Department only gets 3,200 calls per year, and Auburn gets 5,600 calls per year. Per firefighter, Elmira gets 53 calls per firefighter, and Auburn gets 86 calls per firefighter. Elmira is geographically smaller. I do not see this comparison as accurate. But going on to something that Councilor Smith said earlier, where he would rather listen to the advice of the lawyer, a lawyer that is not our corporation counsel, but a lawyer that is hired from outside the city, and seeing this as an opportunity to go after minimum manning. Now, I don't really think that that should be a priority of our elected officials. I think a priority is to try to work with with collective bargaining so that both sides can be heard. What this opportunity meant was that the city could go forward and cut 10 positions, which I see as very aggressive and very rash. And I think that was not done in a way that was respectful to the firefighters. Now, I can understand that if you would negotiate and discuss attrition, but this is going even further, and I find it very aggressive, and I promise I will never do something on the advice of a lawyer that is not from Auburn, and I would never do that to public safety in the city of Auburn.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. Councilor Smith, you'll have 1 minute, then Mr. DeAngelis, 1 minute.
I could go through a number of departments. I can go through Glen Cove, New York, population of 27,000, Middleton with 28,000, North Tonawanda, 31,000. All their budgets are far smaller, and all of them have smaller personnel, okay? And they have bigger cities. Elmira also has a college town. Now, Mr. Cuddy will learn, and in all due respect, he doesn't understand the process. You need specialties when it comes to lawyers in certain areas. Okay, we wanted a top-notch labor attorney, which we have hired, okay, who's looked into the case law and said that we have an excellent chance of winning this minimum manning. Now, again, you can stay with the status quo, okay? Mr. Cuddy's going to bring back 10 firemen. Guys, he just added, along with the other the other challengers here have said they're going to add back to 10 firemen. So that means they're going to add $1 million tax bill, another $1 million deficit to what we currently have. The question is how are you going to pay for that? That's the key question here. We have a safe city, and you can have an affordable city. Other cities across the country are doing that.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. DeAngelis.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out Mr. Smith is continually trying to put words in people's mouths. You didn't hear me say anything about cutting a deal. You didn't. All these things that he's saying, trying to point out to you, the citizens of the city, that we're saying these things. I'm saying these things. I'm not. What I want to do is what's in the best interest of the community. I want to make sure public safety is there for us whenever anyone needs it. Now, by last minute, what I'm talking about is all we have seen is Mr. Smith get up and say, this is my analysis. Well, where's the professional analysis that was done? There has been none. And your analysis was put forth at the last minute. It wasn't shared publicly with anyone. When you're making these kinds of decisions, we need to involve the public. It's just like the budget process and a lot of other things that are going on. everything seems to be being done, everything you're talking about was done behind closed doors. We need to involve the public and have a public discussion, not do things at the last minute.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Mr. Cuddy and then Ms. McCormick. Mr. Cuddy.
I just wanted to clarify, again, Counselor Smith, I never said that I would bring the 10 firefighters back. I just said I would never do that to the firefighters in the fashion that you had done that. So what I would like to say is that it's not what has been done that is wrong. It's how it is done. If there were cuts that needed to be made, they could have been done in a way that was not so aggressive and cut so deep into the department. But this shock and awe treatment of our public employees, I think, is the wrong way to go, and it cuts into the morale of the city.
Okay. Ms. McCormick, we'll finish off on this question.
Yes, I too want to just say, Counselor Smith mentioned that his challengers wanted to add $1 million to the budget. That is incorrect. I would not. The question was, would you have handled the cutting of the fire department the same? And that my answer was no, I would not. In September of '09, I believe it was September of '09, the most recent contract for the fire department was voted on, and both Counselor Smith and Counselor Graney voted in favor of it, and that is where the minimum manning was established that we are working under right now. So it's kind of confusing whether he was for it then. Did all of a sudden that become a burden to the city this year? The thing that we're trying to blame public service and civil servants for the deficit we're having, and when it's really the failed cogen that's costing the city millions and millions of dollars.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCormick. So that I can clarify, we will go one extra question, 1 minute responses for each question. We're now into 25 minutes into the forum. We've had one question. So we're going to go back to Mr. Boyer. I do also want to suggest this. We haven't crossed that line yet. Mr. Boyer asks the questions, so please do not ask questions of your opponents. You may ask it rhetorically, but you shouldn't be asking it to expect that they will get a response. Mr. Boyer.
All right, all the lessons we've learned from 10 years
of doing forums.
I do have one more round of fire, yeah.
Okay.
Well, because
That's okay.
That
That's
round
fine.
was a lot about looking at what's been done, and I would like to pose a question about where to go from here, and maybe two parts of that. One is there is a contract that remains settled or to be negotiated potentially, as well as a grant that the majority on council recently decided that we shouldn't apply for at this point. So I want everyone's opinion on where we stand on those two issues.
Mr. DeAngelis, you go first with 2 minutes.
I believe that, number one, the contract as it exists today, there is language in the contract that was agreed to by both parties that says the contract will remain in effect. Contract and any side agreements will remain in effect until a new contract is agreed to by both parties. So that's why I'm saying I think the potential for this to cost more money in the long run is there because of that. We're already seeing that happen. With regard to the grant, I don't know why any reasonable person would not at least apply for the grant instead of just slamming the door shut. Language in that grant that speaks to staffing levels. First of all, the grant, if it were received, should be viewed as a short-term solution, not a long-term solution to the problem. And it would buy us time. It's the reasonable thing to do. I'm not concerned with any language in the contract that speaks to staffing levels. That is something that will have to be worked out for the long term. And I think staffing at the fire department, police department, and all of the other departments should be handled in a total review and restructuring of the city organization. That's where it should be done in an organized fashion with public input, with the departments involved, with the proper analysis. We can't have a single member of council getting up and declaring that this is the way it is because these are my numbers or this is my analysis. We all have to work together. and we have to try to find a long-term viable solution to this problem. And the only way to do that is to work through the process, to sit down with the unions and try to work out a long-term sustainable solution.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndres. Councilor Smith on both the long-term and also the SAFER grant.
First of all, the grant, what the grant would have done is it would have put every single department on the chopping block except for the fire department. Now, the reason why we even apply for it, because as elections can come, if any two of these three here get elected, they're going to add another $1 million on to our deficit. All right. Now, I'm shocked tonight to hear that they said they're not going to hire back 10 firemen, when I know for sure that 2 of them, and in fact, have said that, and they've said that to the fire department. Now, there's confusion with you, Mr. DeAngelis, because we have no idea where you are on these issues. We've gone through this process. Okay, we've talked with our labor attorney. Our attorney showed us case law. Okay, where we can come out of this and get rid of the minimum manning. The minimum manning was put in well before I was taken into office. This year, when I've been in the minority for 6 years, and this year in the 2009 contract, I did vote for that contract because we lowered the minimum manning level from 15 to 14. But now I have the votes. I had the votes to go even further because it saves you money. All right, and we can have a department just like all the other departments across the country. 73% of the fire departments across the country volunteer. Now, I'm not advocating for a volunteer fire department. I'm looking to find the fire department where it's right sizes the city of Auburn. Okay, we had 77 fire department before we just cut the last 10. Okay, 5 of them were cut. We didn't hire back 5 others. Okay, so now we have a fire department that's 66. All our trucks are still manned, and our response times are still going to stay the same. They want to create hysteria because they want to scare you. But that's not the truth. That's not what leadership does. Mr. DeAngelis wants to take public opinion polls, and he wants to bring everybody into the room. We've done that. I've talked to the chief of the fire department. I've talked to other firemen. They wanted no budging whatsoever on the minimum manning. As a matter of fact, they said minimum manning is non-negotiable. The grant sounds good, but there's always strings attached with federal grants, and I'm not going to cut the other departments because of that.
Mr. Cuddy, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of where does the fire department go from here and the SAFER grant.
Well, I'd like to first talk about the SAFER grant. Councilor Smith says that would have tied the hands of future councils. I tend to disagree. It would have given the council the time to do what it should have done and address the issue of our budget deficit. So I think that rejecting that grant was not in the best interest of the city because, number one, as Ms. McCormick had mentioned earlier, that would have brought revenue into the city. It would have kept those jobs for the time being. It doesn't make sense to reject federal money on several reasons. Because number one, it's rare that we get that kind of money into municipalities, and number two, it's also poor practice, especially when we're trying to get other grants. And if we have a council that seems resistant to the kind of funding that this community definitely needs, it may be difficult to get future funding. Now, as far as how other departments are perceiving how the fire department may have gotten this grant, and would that cause jealousy or giving I think putting that out there, as Councilor Smith has done, I think causes divisions within the various departments within the city. And I like to consider Auburn a whole, a city in which all the departments should be working together, and when one department wins, all departments win. So I don't want to encourage this kind of divide and conquer mentality in our government because it doesn't really serve anyone.
Ms. McCormick, you'll go last on this particular question.
Sure. I'll start with the grant. I think that was a huge mistake not to apply for the grant. Again, applying for the grant just means you're applying for it. If you're awarded the grant, council still had the opportunity to say no. Not applying for it was ridiculous. And if we had been successful, it would have bought some time to do whatever it is that council as a whole decided to do in an orderly, planned fashion, rather than cutting now and trying to figure out how to make things happen without the 5 men. I'm not an expert in the fire department, but I do know they have certain procedures that are in place, and they need to adjust the way they do things. And to just on July 1st say, these guys are done, is not really a responsible way to run anything, let alone public safety. I just think it was short-sighted and irresponsible to not just apply for that grant. As far as the fire department and cutting goes and how it'll affect other departments, again, that goes back to planning and not looking at the overall picture. We're still paying the overtime, just like, every month we're paying overtime, not just once a year, $60,000 plus. We did this back 8 years ago when Councilor Graney and Councilor Smith first came. They would not fill positions for assistant fire chiefs, and the overtime went out of sky high. Again, it was, if you have a contract, you have to meet the demands of the contract, or we pay the price, the taxpayers. And one other thing about the grant is I've read, anyway, I didn't hear it firsthand, Senator DeFrancisco said that they do look unfavorably on communities that do not apply or refuse grants. And much of what we do here in the city that is successful is done by grant funds.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. I saw Councilor Smith, you
Yes.
get 1 minute rebuttal.
Okay, Mr. Cuddy says consider Auburn as a whole, and that's what I'm trying to do. If we took this grant, you can't just consider Auburn as a whole. If we took this grant, every department would have suffered the consequences, and once again, the Auburn Fire Department, the largest department, would have been immune from any cuts. All right, that's the truth of the matter. And the contract is Mrs. McCormick talks about paying the price. It's the contract that's making us pay the price. It's the contract that's unaffordable in the city of Auburn. We have 4 assistant chiefs with bennies making $104,000 apiece. We can't afford it in this city. These are salaries that we cannot sustain. It's about making Auburn a sustainable city, the affordable city. My 3 challengers are saying it can't be done. The status quo has to say. For 2 new candidates, they have pretty old ways of trying to solve the problems. All right, we need to go after the problem, and that's the contract. And we've negotiated, and negotiations have come back that will have cost us even more.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and we'll go to Mr. DeAngelis and then Ms. McCormick.
Councilor Smith has had 8 years on the council now to work on these issues and to come up with a solution. And it's in the last year, at the end of his term of in the second term of office, that this surfaces. As was discussed here by everyone, I mean, there is a process. There's a legal process. There are contracts. I want to get to a point where we have a long-term sustainable solution. But to throw out and make comments saying that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I don't know how the counselor knows what I'm thinking. He seems to be talking a lot about what I'm thinking and what everyone else sitting here at this table is thinking, instead of talking about his own thoughts and what he feels about this situation. If he worked on a solution to this problem during the 8 years that he's been on the council,
Thank you,
maybe
Mayor.
we wouldn't be sitting in this position right now.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. McCormick, and we'll see if Mr. Cuddy wants a response. You have 1 minute.
Just 2 things I disagree with, that other departments would suffer. They've suffered already, no doubt, but that's apples and oranges again. You can't take $1 million out of a department that's only has a budget of $80,000. You'd have to eliminate an entire service. There's not enough time to go into that debate. But as far as the contract costing the city money, the contract is a contract. It's like if I have a mortgage for my house and I decide somewhere in the 15-year mortgage that I think the rate's too much, I can't just stop paying it because I don't like the terms of the contract. A contract is a legal document, a binding legal document. You have to abide by it or you pay the consequences. I think they would take my house. So I think if you have a contract with a union, you have to go by the elements of that contract.
Thank you. Mr. Cuddy, you did not want, nope,
Can I,
okay.
can I respond, or did I already respond?
You've responded,
Thank
all
you.
right. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, we'll shift gears to something else, which has been actually not just this year, but for several years, there's been quite a few projects in the city of Auburn that have gone to the Industrial Development Agency and asked for and received payment in lieu of taxes programs to help them get their projects going in exchange for breaks on their taxes. And there's been some discussion about that. There's also been a major deal, older deal that with Nucor Steel that took effect this year that took a lot of money off the tax rolls as well, or off the assessment rolls. So my overall question for everyone is, given where we are now with the city, what should be happening with respect to pilot applications as we go forward? How should they be reviewed? What should criteria be? And is there a bottom line, no more pilots type of situation that we need to establish?
Councilor Smith, you go first on this one.
Like I've done for the last 8 years is on this issue and many other issues, is I've led the way on this. No longer are people coming in asking for these insane amount of pilots. When I first got on the ADA board, I challenged these pilots. I challenged these 25-year pilots, pilot for jobs that were for potential jobs that were really maybe 10 to 15 low-paying jobs. You look at right now, 33% of Auburn's property value is exempted. Okay, so we're losing right now. Now the state average is 25%. If we had 25%, we would have been bringing in $4.4 million worth of tax revenue. I've led the way on that, even being in the minority in the 6 years. So, and that's a record I'll continue to run on. I've addressed the issue of pilots, and that's why we're looking differently at pilots. I've addressed the issue of our contracts. I've addressed every single issue you can imagine on taxing and spending. I've addressed all those issues. Now, Mr. D'Angelo's been in office for 12 years total. Not once does he want to bring up his record. Okay, I defend my record. I will, and people want to talk about the process. People want to talk about the process of doing things because they don't have the political courage to say, you know what, I'm either going to cut spending or I'm going to raise your taxes over the tax cap. Because that's the only solution. These three can either go. Either I'm going to bring back everyone like they have promised, or they're going to continue to cut, or they're going to raise taxes. Political will and courage is what's going to get us through this, not platitudes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We'll now have 2 minutes on pilots. Mr. Cuddy.
I believe that pilots are very important, and I know that there's been a lot of criticism of 2 projects that have received pilot money over the last few years. What I'd like to juxtapose that with is what was there earlier and how is that benefiting the city? I don't want to just consider property tax the only way that the city raises money. We are about to shape the way or change the way we are perceived as a city. We have tons of natural and cultural assets in the city that we need to promote. And I think the Musical Theater Festival, the Downtown Theater, the ancillary projects that are developed because of that show that there is a flow of money coming into the city. Developers want to take advantage of the influx of interest in culture in our city. And I think the city needs to see that as a part of its economy now. And to hold on or to constrict the flow of money is not going to help the city at all. In fact, you need to consider that the city, what were those properties doing prior to the pilot programs? How are they benefiting the city? Now we have one building coming up. We have a building that's been built, and we can see the changes that are happening downtown. I want to be somebody on council that sees that potential in Auburn to capitalize on our natural and cultural resources, and I want to encourage that rather than throw roadblocks in the way.
Ms. McCormick, 2 minutes on this issue of pilots and economic development of that nature.
I think that, like Terry was saying, the city has changed. Back when Nucor and McQuay, the manufacturing industry, it's not what it was back then when hundreds of jobs were tied to a pilot program. Now we do need to look at things differently. And the way I looked at the last 2 issues that came up were We've got property that's not doing anything. It's just withering away, and it's not generating any property tax. And we've got investors that want to put their money into something, and they came to the city for consideration for a pilot program. I think we need to work with those kind of people, the investors that see possibilities and see opportunities in the city of Auburn. The hotel is a great example of somebody saw a vacant parking lot or whatever. There was a few buildings on it, but it was a lot of work. And the pilot for that, there's pilots just about for other retail, mostly for other retail ventures. And I think that we have to consider those. We can't just say no to everything and cut and dry, black and white. We have to take into consideration the benefit to the city in the long run, in the big picture of the pilot program as we work with investors in the city.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. DeAngelis, you'll have 2 minutes on this.
Here's the one thing that I don't want to see us do, and that's because of decisions that were made with incentives and pilots, tax breaks for projects. While we all want to see growth, I'd like to see that as well. But I don't want to see basic, essential, necessary services suffer as a result of those kinds of decisions. The approach should be one that's balanced. All of those properties that we're talking about that receive pilots and incentives and various breaks, we still have to provide them with police, fire, and all the other services. So that comes at a cost. I think as we move forward, given our current financial situation, I think we really need to take a critical look at these things as they come forward. We need to remain engaged. We want to move forward, but we don't want to make decisions that are going to have a negative impact on basic essential services. And I think most people would agree with that. They want to be able to, if they have an emergency, pick up the phone, have the fire department respond, have the police department respond, and they like to have some of the other services that they've become accustomed to, like solid waste, curbside pickup, and other things. The streets have to be plowed. So we need to look at this, and we need to conduct this kind of business in a balanced way.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Mr. Smith, you'll have 1 minute.
And here, this is where I do agree with Chris. Mr. Cuddy and Mrs. McCormick have both said no roadblocks and second guessing. Well, I interpret that as rubber stamping. And what happens is if you have a rubber stamp mentality, and what that's going to do is that means developers are going to be writing checks that struggling taxpayers within this community are going to have to pay. All right, you have to find that fine line. Now, with some of these pilot projects that have gone on in Auburn, I've supported them, but I've gone against them, but I would support them with an alternative measure. Okay, maybe not as high as a pilot increase, because I understand few people, are going to make a lot of money with a lot of people investing in it, and that's the taxpayers in this community. And what we need to understand here with the pilots, with the development of downtown, we've invested over $3 million in downtown. Downtown has been revitalized, but now we need to focus in on the neighborhoods. If we lose the neighborhood, it doesn't matter what we're doing in downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Cuddy, you have 1 minute on this issue.
I wouldn't characterize myself as being somebody that rubber stamps agendas. I would like to say that the people that are doing development in Auburn are from Auburn. And I see that the pilots are actually, the money stays in the area, whereas the failed energy contract is $1 million that will never, ever come back to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. Mr. DeAngelis.
Yeah. I just would like to point out that I would also pursue legislation from the state that is similar to what happened with other communities. Syracuse is the closest one in particular, where any such pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement for a project, it would be given the review by the Industrial Development Authority, but it would ultimately have to come to the city council for approval, final approval. And the reason I think that needs to be done, particularly at this time, is it's the council, the city council, who is responsible for putting a budget together, voting and putting that budget in place. And it's the council that's responsible for how your tax dollars are spent. So I think, not to take anything away from the people who are on the board, the ADA board, that conduct that activity on behalf of the city, I think those decisions, because of our financial situation, need to be reviewed and
Thank you,
approved
Mayor.
by the city council.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McCormick, did you want to follow up or
No,
no?
I'm fine.
No? Okay. Just as a identification of where we are, we're about halfway through our 2013 City Council Forum. With us today are Debbie McCormick, who is on the Democratic Working Families Party and Auburn First Party, Chris DeAngelis, who is on the Republican and Independent lines, Matthew Smith, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence line, and Mr. Cuddy, Terry Cuddy, who is on the Democratic Working Families and Auburn First Party. Just before we started taping, Mr. Graney, who is on the Conservative line, notified us he would not be attending. They're being asked questions by Mr. Boyer. We're about a little over halfway.
Okay, I'll try to keep moving. I know, I think Mr. Cuddy's mentioned a few times the generator, the landfill generator project, and that's obviously been debated a lot in this campaign, so I'd just like to almost just say generator go. But in general, I mean, it's a contract that everyone agrees the city's been paying out money because of the contract. How much is, I've heard different numbers from different people, but the question is, what do we have to do going forward now?
And this is for all the candidates.
All the candidates.
Mr. Cuddy, you're up first.
I believe that the municipalities should focus on their core competencies. That's public safety, public works, and public utilities. It's not our job to try to find ways to make money to a point where we're doing business with these private corporations that end up taking advantage of that. And I've been going to council, most recently, obviously, running for office, and every week or every few weeks, there's inevitably some private company trying to sell an idea that might save Auburn some money. And we've seen an issue where we've seen people come in with PowerPoint saying that our sludge can be used to generate money. We're seeing a private company that wants to actually lease our water and sewer. And these kinds of deals, when I see these kinds of presentations, all I can think of is the failed energy contract, the cogen. They do not work to benefit the city. There's always something that's going to be at the disadvantage of our city. So I want to stick to our core competencies, and I want to make sure that we don't get stuck with another 15-year contract, or in the instance of the water and sewer, which was proposed, 50-year contract. I don't think that would happen, but I wouldn't invite these kinds of businesses to come in to try to take advantage of a council. So I see that 15-year contract as potentially losing us $15 million.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. Mr. McCormick, you have 2 minutes on this issue of cogen.
The cogen plant, and I'm not sure if through all the different campaign literature and debates, if the average person at home honestly can tell us what that is. What is the cogen? All I can associate it with is a lot of lost tax dollars. I have here, in case you want to know exactly, there's a lot of numbers bounced around, but just this year, May 23rd, 2013, the City Council passed a resolution that they had to pass because the city charter requires that no fund in the city budget be overdrawn. And I'll read it right from here. Public utility fund is overdrawn in the amount of $2,233,478 as of April 30th, and is expected that that amount will be overdrawn by the end of the year at $2.5 million. This has got us nothing. That is $2.5 million that could have paid for a lot of services, could have reduced perhaps maybe a tax rate or two. A lot of the services that we see being cut, crossing guards, SROs, fire, planning department employees, these dollars could have gone towards things that have kept this city of Auburn's financial boat afloat. And I think that was, the power utility is the worst thing that I can think of in a long time.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. DeAngelis, you have 2 minutes on this issue of cogen.
Okay. The cogen plant is the use of methane gas, which is a natural byproduct of waste decomposing at our landfill. It should have been viewed from the start as an opportunity for us to create a new revenue stream. Other entities have done just that. Only in Auburn have we managed to find a way to lose money. I would just like to point out there's been a lot said on both sides of this issue. I do have a document dated January of 2011. It was to Mr. Rossi, and it was to the City Council. It was an analysis done by an independent third party of that particular facility, and in this study, they're saying that the forecasted losses will exceed $765,000 per year. And that doesn't include a thorough analysis of all of the other costs. I don't really think we have seen what the true cost of the losses are. Now, it's been said that other councils reviewed it, that this council, current council, the incumbents sat there and they reviewed it, and they got legal advice, and they approved it. Well, they approved the document. I have all the studies here. I have all of the agreements here. There's an EPA review of the project. It shows that this council took this project on, and they did it without having all of the methane gas that they needed. They're getting it strictly from the landfill. For this project, as it was built to be financially viable, it also had another component, which they failed to do. Now, I'm not saying that I was for that, but they took a project that was reviewed by the federal government, the EPA, and they only did part of it, and they're not getting all the methane gas they need there. So I don't understand why that type of decision was made, and that's what has led to the big losses at that facility.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Councilor Smith, you'll have 2 minutes on cogen.
This is a project that a year from now will not be an issue. We are close to settling this issue. You've heard numbers all over the place I heard that one of the last forums that I was unable to attend, that we've been losing money for 8 years since I've been in office. Well, the project didn't go online until 2010. Now, since so, we could not have been losing money for 8 years. Are we losing money now? Absolutely. Are we taking aggressive steps like we have been for the last year and a half? Sure, we're doing that. The fact is when I first took office, we were losing $1.4 million on the incinerator project. Okay, Mr. DeAngelis said he would have fixed it. He said he would have added a digester. Talked to the experts, and they would have said that now if we had the digester, we would have been losing even more money. Okay, they don't understand the concepts. We had 2 reputable engineering firms who told us you have plenty of methane to supply those generators. He mentions a 2011 study. When the project was in its conception in 2009, in 2008, even before then, we had plenty of methane, according to the experts. NYSERDA, the DEC, the EPA, 2 councils unanimously voted for this project. But you know what's completely being avoided in this discussion is the cost avoidance. Because what we do is we supply power to the wastewater treatment plant, where if we weren't providing them power, NYSEG would be charging us. So on average, what we're losing per year, and I'm not saying this is a small amount of money, we're losing about $400,000 a year. Mr. Cuddy throws a number of $15 million a year. Where's their evidence for this? Where are these charts? 6 million, 8 million, 15 million. We are addressing this issue. This is a project that can work. We had a customer coming in, but unfortunately, due to certain circumstances that I cannot discuss out here in public, that company did not come in. So please, there's a lot of misinformation here, but it's information that they know very little about, and they're using this topic for their own political advantage. Tag me in my record, and this is the only thing that they've been able to go after me on.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. DeAngelis, you'll be first, then Mr. Cuddy.
Yeah, this project is in fact losing a lot of money. And all that it really takes on the part of those who supported it really is to admit that a mistake was made. The way this project was handled was a big mistake. And let us all start working towards a solution. We need to get out of this contract if we can, or we need to find ways to turn that financial situation around. I am not, never said I was for the digester. Here we go again. I'm spending time having to say to you, the people of the city, that Mr. Smith keeps saying things that I'm thinking or that I'm saying. I didn't say that. Was not for that. I did not say I was for that. I think we need to move towards the future. We all know that it's losing money. We can have an argument about exactly what it's losing, the amount it's losing, but it is losing, and it's losing big money. We need to move forward. We need to get out of the contract. All of a sudden, we're led to believe by Mr. Smith that there's a solution, and we're supposed to believe him when he's led us down this path and brought us into this situation.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Mr. Cuddy.
I did not say $15 million per year. I just did basic math and added 15 years with a contract like this that is losing $1 million a year is equal to $15 million total. And that money could go towards public safety and go towards rebuilding the city that is in dire financial need. So I just wanted to clarify that I did not say we're losing $15 million per year.
Ms. McCormick, and then Mr. Smith.
I do as well want to quantify, correct, just so that Mr. Smith realizes that this figure that I quoted is from a resolution voted on by the City Council. So I didn't make it up, and it can be, I'll bring copies to anyone that wants a copy of it. It was $2.5 million overdrawn in the fund this year. And last week at City Council meeting, the Director for Public Utilities reported in her budget, she has budgeted $87,000 per month to pay the debt or the outstanding overdrawn leaking fund called the Power Utility. So $87,000 per month times 12. I did not make that number up either. That comes right from the city budget. So I just wanted to be clear that I didn't make the number up.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you have 1
Okay,
minute.
4 quick points. One, in the Ignite Forum, Mr. DeAngelis, you said that you would have added the digester to the project. That's what you said in the Ignite Forum. Number 2, that we're not going to have a 15-year contract because we're going to be out of this contract in the very near future. Number 3, the resolution that Mrs. McCormick is referring to, that was not new money being transferred. That was done more for our finances, for our financial records. Okay, that was more of a clerical formulation than anything else, and we clearly specified that during that council meeting. Also, let me go back to the June 26 comment by our city manager. The cogen is a small element of our budgetary problems. They want to focus in on the cogen because they don't want to focus in on the heavy decisions. If you take the cogen out of the equation, we're still $3 million in the hole. How are these 3 going to do it? They're not going to make any cuts, so that means they're going to raise taxes, okay? And they're going to be willing to go over the tax cap. Those are the answers we need to hear.
I will open it up for one more round for 1 minute. Mr. DeAngelis, you get 1 minute.
I never indicated that I was for the digester part of the project. And, you know, I sit here throughout this debate, and every time Mr. Smith talks, he's saying things that I did not say, that cannot be attributed to me. I've talked in this campaign about a process of restructuring. I've talked about areas where we need to go in order to get our city back on financial good health. It won't be easy, but we have to do that. Now, Mr. Smith thinks he knows what I'm thinking and what everyone else is thinking, but he doesn't. We need to move the city forward. We need to move the city forward in a way where we organize the city in a cost-effective way, or we're saving money, we need to reach out and speak with our unions and work towards a sustainable solution with them so that we can provide services in a cost-effective way.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelo. Anyone else? Ms. McCormick.
Just one thing. The explanation that Mr. Smith gave about this resolution being that it's just a clerical thing, I don't know, but $2.5 million to me, whether it's a clerical thing or a big pile of cash sitting there, it's a lot of money. It's my crossing guard, it's my SRO, it's my code office being open 5 days a week, it's my public safety, it's the infrastructure of my city. I don't care if I don't believe that it's just paper, that the city council has to vote to transfer money. Money to me is money. I didn't take accounting, but I think money is money. And I don't believe you can just dismiss $2.5 million as if it was just a clerical thing.
Mr. Smith, you'll have 1 minute.
Again, Debbie, you don't understand. No one's dismissing the amount of money that we've lost on this facility. And that's why we've aggressively, for the last year and a half, we've aggressively are in negotiations right now with it. Okay? But it's not the amount that you guys have said it, and you guys are, you three want to say that this is the problem for our city's financial problems. Okay? Yes. I'm just repeating what you said in the Ignite Forum, Mr. DeAngelis, and I'm just repeating what you've said in other comments. But the problem is you three don't say enough. We don't know where you stand. You know, the old 80s commercial, where's the beef? All right, where's the beef when it comes to your plans to solving our problems and making Auburn an affordable city? You want to say cogen, 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 but again, I repeat Mr. Selby's words. This is a small element of our budget. All right, we need a sustainable city by addressing the structural deficits. And the only way you're going to address structural deficits is by making tough decisions, is having the political courage to move on and to address the issues and look at a crowd of people and say, we're going to have to downsize because our city is not 35,000, it's 27,000.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Cuddy, you have the last of the 1 minute rebuttals.
I want to say that there's one structural deficit that needs to be addressed, and that is we do not have a comptroller. And we need a comptroller to actually tell us where we are financially. Now, I know in a recent council meeting, they have created a new position, the assistant city manager. But I see that as some potential, but I think we need to get a comptroller first. I don't think the assistant city manager needs to be, has to also be a human resources person and be in charge of public utilities. Again, we need somebody that's specialized in accounting and able to do the comptrolling job. We have suffered because we are basically driving with our lights off. We need to have a clear idea of where we are financially before we move forward, because we do need to build the city rather than just cut our way out of our issues.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. We are about an hour in. We have about 30 minutes left, including closing statements. Mr. Boyer,
Okay.
we haven't forgotten about you over here.
Try to get to a few more topics if we can. Keep your answers brief.
Thus,
One
he's
thing-
saying that you don't have to use all 2 minutes.
I'll try to lump this together because it both deal with the school district and the city. And we had crossing guard budget cuts this year, and there was also some discussion about how the SROs, the school resource officers, are funded. And I guess both crossing guard and SRO, my question for everyone is how and to what degree should those positions?
Okay, and Mr. Cuddy, you had the first question on cogen first, so it's now Ms. McCormick's turn.
Okay. To what degree should they be funded? Well,
And
in the
how?
case, pardon?
And how?
And how?
What
Well,
structure?
in the case this year, this SROs, I think, should not have been altered because we'd already made a commitment to the school district, and they had already we citizens had already voted on their budget. We had an agreement with them, although it wasn't a contract signed. It had been our past practice for the last, I think since the SRO program came into play about 10 years ago. That's when they planned their budget. We pretty much told them, yep, that looks good. And that's what we did. I think it was, again, last minute at at a council meeting. I don't know if they planned it before they walked in the door or not. To do that, it it puts, it gives the city and another entity, like the school district, puts you in a bad relationship with them. Now they don't have any trust. They're left scrambling. Children, school teachers, parents, they're all left wondering what's going to happen. And I do believe it wasn't even resolved the first football game. The superintendent had to scramble to get, these are children, teenagers that we're talking about. We're not talking about trees or curbs or things that are inanimate. These are lives that we're talking about. I think that that should not have been done. I think in the future, the SRO program we do need to look at everybody sharing the cost of it. The school district is made up of more than just City of Auburn kids. There are kids from the different towns around the city that participate, and I'd love to try to work with the towns to look into helping us fund the SRO program. Crossing guards, I don't think should have been cut. I don't think that was a big enough, it was so insignificant to cause so much stress on so close to the first week of school. It's just like short-sighted to
Thank you.
do something like that.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. Dangerous, on this issue of crossing guards and SROs.
I would not have cut the crossing guards, and I do believe that whether it be crossing guards or SROs, which anyone who has children in school will tell you is a valuable program in the schools. I do believe we should have a continuing dialogue with the school district, and we should try to get other parties that have children going to the Auburn Enlarged School District involved in covering some of the costs. They are receiving some of the benefit. Let me just point out something. All of this is impacted potentially by our budget, and Mr. Selby, the city manager, has talked about a structural deficit that's built into the budget to the tune of $3.2 to $3.5 million. So we have to be engaged, and we have to look at the total picture, where we can bring in new revenues. We have to do that. Just briefly going to say that the cogen is a negative impact. $1 million of that $3.2 million structural deficit has to come from the general fund. It's supported by the general fund. So that project is a huge part of our problem. Other things that people haven't heard in this campaign currently, some people have asked, what are the city cars doing going up and down the street? This current council decided to do a complete reval, which means your assessments will be adjusted either upward or downward. And every time that's done, the city does see an increase in revenue. So I'm not saying I would be for that, but it is underway. This current council decided to do it. It will result in increased revenues through property taxes, and people should be aware of that coming.
Thank you, Mr. Dangerous. Mr. Smith, on this issue of SROs and crossing guards.
I've always been in favor of SROs, and I will continue to support SROs. I will be in favor of our police department controlling and monitoring the SROs. They're under we're liable for them, and the city police chief should be responsible for the SROs. Debbie mentioned the football games. The difference was not having an SRO there and a uniformed police officer was, well, either you pay $400 or $1,200. So we save money by only paying regular police officers, which gives every police officer the opportunity to chaperone a football game, if you want to call it chaperoning. But I always will be in support of the SRO program. Crossing guards, I voted against cutting the crossing guards. That's something that we do need, and that affects my own children as well. But what we need to understand here, and going back to Mr. Cuddy's point, we did not add a new position. The position that we added is a comptroller, and I agree with him. We do need a comptroller, and that's something that's sorely been missing for the last 2 years, is a consistent comptroller. But we're adding a comptroller, but we're adding duties to that comptroller. So what we're doing is we're smart sizing government. And we're going to have a comptroller that's going to have dual responsibilities, not just being the comptroller. So that's not a new assistant city manager is not a new position. It's a comptroller also taking on the duties of assistant city manager, where if the city manager was to leave for whatever reason, we have someone with the financial background to be able to run the day-to-day finances.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Cuddy, you have 2 minutes on this issue of SROs and crossing guards.
I believe that the SROs, we'll start with the crossing guards. As Ms. McCormick had indicated, in the budget, the school district had already had that money allocated. And I find it a pattern with the current council that they tend to act before they think, because there's several instances where something is acted upon, and then we're backpedaling with trying to renegotiate things. Same thing happened with the fire department. We cut 10 positions, and now there's litigation. So I think what needs to happen is that City Council needs to be clear, and I need to add one more. There was a proposal to change the parking to 9 p.m. And that was another issue where the City Council acted, because that was actually in the budget. So one of the things that needs to happen is that the council needs to be very clear as to why they're voting before they vote, and all the parties need to know what's happening rather than continue to be blindsided.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you'll have 1 minute.
Yeah, to respond to that, just the one part of this. Those of you that have watched council for the last 8 years, criticize me or support me, you know that I come very well prepared. And there's no knee-jerk reaction. I've had discussions before on cutting those positions with the fire department way before the budget. What it comes down to is we had a fire department that didn't want to really negotiate. And Ms. McCormick said they were willing to make $600,000 worth of concessions. Talk to the city manager and he'll tell you that's not true. Talk to our labor attorney and he'll certainly tell you not true. Now, I can't go into all the specifics. Legally, I cannot. But let me tell you something. The deal that they put on the table would have cost the city even more money. Okay, that's the truth. Okay, I did the research in other fire districts. Okay, I've done the research as far as what other cities are doing. Okay, we need to be proactive. Now, Mr. Cuddy mentioned that we don't need to look at we only need to do certain things, and we don't need to look at other ways to generate revenue. Well, that just means that we're only going to get revenue from the people that are property owners, and we can't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Cuddy, you'll have 1 minute.
I want to make sure that people are clear is that if the kind of progress and the development that is happening in the city, in downtown, comes to fruition, there will be also a windfall of sales tax revenue. Now, granted, I know there's talk about trying to work with the county to rework the sales tax formula. Whether that can come to fruition or not, again, that still has yet to be determined. But all in all, we will still get revenue from the sales tax, from the progress that is happening in our city and the development that is happening downtown.
Mr. DeAngelis, you'll have 1 minute.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that it's good that we're having this forum, it's good that we're talking about these issues, but the main focus in this campaign has been cogen, fire department. We have to talk about them, but there are a lot of other things going on. One of the things that will have an impact on all of this is if you take a look at any of the recent city financial audits. Again, I don't know if the public realizes this, but the city is approximately a total of $81 million in debt. About $15 million of that is long-term unfunded debt that will have to be paid for when those obligations come due, and many of them are related to the landfill operation itself, not necessarily the cogen. The other debt is already on a debt schedule, and the city has to budget several $1 million a year to pay interest and principal. So I think people need to really know what our financial situation is and why these issues are so critical.
Thank you.
Why not?
Okay.
Why
Ms.
not?
McCormick, you'll finish up.
It's not as much a rebuttal, but I've got a minute to kind of tag along with what Chris is talking about. There are a lot of other things, and that's the problem with not having a comptroller. and no one asked, but I really think a comptroller at this point with the city that needs to be focused only on the finances. We've been so long without a consistent, reliable comptroller in place that it's going to take heroic Herculean efforts. Right now, we are paying outside agencies, a CPA firm and another individual, that's 2 entities, to help us close our books. That's how complicated it is. This isn't like balancing your checkbook. The city's finances are complicated, and I don't think we know what we don't know. That's how far behind we are. I've actually, in preparing for some of the council debates, I looked on websites in Albany, and we're not even reporting some of our
Thank you,
things.
Mr. McCoy. Mr. Boyer is going to ask maybe possibly up to 2, but one-minute question, and there likely will not be rebuttal on this. Mr. Boyer.
All right, I'll try to make it
Can I-
straightforward and simple.
If it's for everybody, Mr.
Yeah.
DeAngelis is going first.
Last week, council voted, it was a second vote, I guess, to move the downtown theater project forward, a 3-1 vote, strong opposition from Councilor Ruzicka to that. I just want all 4 of you to state your position on that project as far as the city moving it forward.
Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, that project is something that's been in the making for a long time. There have been decisions that have been made by all of the governmental entities. There have been decisions and commitments made by people in the private sector. This decision you refer to by the City Council is one step in the process, and there's no doubt that project will move forward. What I find pretty sad is that it took so long to get this decision made, and all that really was required was not all these court proceedings. It was at the heart of all these court proceedings was follow the law, conduct the secret process in the right manner, in accordance with the law. And had that been done to begin with, instead of the parties fighting over it, maybe this decision that you saw made on the SECRA, the Environmental Quality Review, it could have been done a long time ago. It didn't
Thank you,
have
Mr.
to
DeAngelis.
be done the way it was done.
Mr.
Real
Smith.
quick, yes or no, though? For
I said it's going. I said it's going
last
to go
week's vote,
forward.
if you were on the council, would have been a yes?
Yes. As long as the secret was followed and was done in accordance with the law, yes, there's no reason not to vote against the secret process.
Sorry, take away from your time.
That's all right. Of course, I voted yes, and my main concern was the fire issue. And as Mr. DeAngelis just said, 2 years ago, I believe, one of the issues I did have against it was I knew that this was going to face litigation. And I wish we did go with the long form with the secret process, all right, because I think that would have saved us some time. I'm all for Auburn having a diverse economy, okay, tourism, okay, the theater now. And I'm not giving up on manufacturing. That's why we need to be aggressive. And what I've proposed in the past is for us to be aggressive in attracting new businesses, forming partnerships with the county. I've already had discussions with the town of Senate and getting the generic seeker ready and having land available so we can try to land some type of small manufacturing or medium-sized manufacturing into our area. We need to be aggressive. We need to be proactive. These are things that I've championed all 8 years in office, even in the minority. Okay, I've pushed forward these things. So the theater is going to be one component, but I think there's other things too that we need to celebrate within our community. Okay, and we have the perfect downtown to do it.
Thank you, Councilor. We did give you the full minute. We didn't take away from your time. Mr. Cuddy, on the seeker and moving the project forward for downtown.
I would have voted for it, and I agree with several things that Councilor Smith just said. We do need to make Auburn a destination, and I see the Musical Theater Festival as one way to add to the many feathers in our cap to make Auburn attractive to businesses. If there's culture, that can attract a small business or a small manufacturing company. If families come to see our city and see that we have a strong school district, that will attract them as well. So I see that, I agree with Councilor Smith that passing this legislation or at least giving the go-ahead to this theater project is the right thing to do to have Auburn move forward.
Mr. McCormick, you'll have 2 minutes on this, or 1 minute, excuse me, on this issue of the Musical Theater Festival downtown.
The short answer is yes, I would wholeheartedly have supported it, given everything was in order in the seeker. All along the process from back when the Callett building being torn down through today, it seems to have bumped into every single hurdle that could be created. And I think that's a shame. I think a lot of the hurdles could have been avoided. And I find it disturbing that a member of council pretty much is always against it moving forward. It to the degree that it upsets people in the public. When you go out afterwards, they're like, "What's wrong? Why doesn't he?" And I just think, who is he working for? The city taxpayers or somebody else? I think city councils to champion these kind of efforts that are going to make the city stronger and bring in new income and revenue sources, not try to stop them.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. One last 1-minute question.
Good, okay. City Manager Doug Selby has been with us for a couple of years now, and he's obviously the day-to-day leader of the city government. In 1 minute, assess his performance and tell us, if you are on council, would you anticipate having him continue? Because I do believe that's a vote that the new council has to take at the beginning.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Smith and go around the horn.
Doug's had a difficult job, especially the last 2 years, not having a consistent comptroller. That department's been in flux for quite some time. So he's managed to keep the finances together, because we just have not been able to find no disrespect to our past comptrollers, the most two recent ones, but just was a right fit for that position. Doug is a gentleman. He always conducts himself as a gentleman. He gets us information in a timely manner. If I have disagreements with Doug, his door is always open, and I've always come and spoke with Doug about these issues. The city manager, I would continue to support, and I have no problem if we were to have to rehire him tomorrow. I would do so. Now, does that mean I agree with everything the city manager does? Absolutely not. As a city councilor, I don't sit back and I don't take the bobblehead mentality of, because the city manager or any other department head proposes something, that's the way we have to go. I'm there to question. I'm there to be your voice on the city council. So that's what I'll continue to do.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Cuddy, you have 1 minute on this issue of Doug Selby's performance and renewing a contract if that comes before council.
I would say that, yes, Doug Selby does have a difficult job, but he's also had a difficult time the last 2 years. I see a council that that's tone is very aggressive, and I've really never seen that kind of approach to governing. Now, I'm not saying I would just say generally, as the council itself seems very at some points pointed and accusatory of some of its workers. And I think City Manager Doug Selby, it's tough for him to, I would say, do his job given that climate on City Council. So if I'm elected, it's not like I would be a rubber stamp or a bobblehead as somebody would say I might be. I would like to work with him.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. Ms. McCormick, on Doug Selby and renewal of a contract.
Well, I have a unique opportunity to work with him day to day, and I think he's a fantastic manager of people, and that's sometimes hard to get both the city manager and a person that can manage people as well, and I mean that in a supervisory, coaching, mentoring kind of a way. He tried to start out by developing people and trying to do it from that angle. But when council changed, the new council came on board, things just, he's doing his job the best he can. I think if we let him do his job, the one we pay him for, and not micromanage and just give him an opportunity to offer his skills and expertise, which he has a lot of, I think we might find that we'd have some good things to have happen here at the city. But there's too much micromanaging. I would definitely want to see him stay with us and give him I would love to see Doug Selby be able to do the job he was hired to do.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. DeAngelis, 1 minute on this issue of Doug Selby and renewal of his contract.
Yeah. I'm willing to sit down and give his contract and give his performance an objective review, and I don't think doing it in the context of a political, making that decision in the context of a political campaign is fair to him. Really, it's not the right thing to do. I have had the opportunity to work with Mr. Selby in my capacity as the Commissioner of Civil Service, and Mr. Selby seems to be a very experienced, very intelligent person, a very likable person. As far as job performance, I think that has to be done there's a process for it, it's a personnel matter, and I really think that we all need to give that an objective review when the time comes.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis, and thank you all for answering questions of Mr. Boyer. Mr. Boyer, thank you for your questions. We're now going to go to closing statements. As we said at the beginning, we did this by draw, and we'll start with, let me just say for the record, Bill Graney, who is on the conservative line, was invited to attend. He did at the last minute say he would be coming, and then followed up and said he would not be coming, so he was offered the chance for being on the air. We'll now go with 2-minute closing statements. We'll hear first from Terry Cuddy, who's on the Democratic Working Families and Auburn First Party. Mr. Cuddy.
I'm running for Auburn City Council because I want to see Auburn improve. My years of being an activist, teacher, community leader, I would like to put that into an official mode as your city councilor. I'm asking for your vote on November 5th, and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. We'll now hear from Councilor Smith, who is an incumbent in the position. He's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines.
Thank you again for holding this forum. I want to thank you too, the individuals there at home. And you are the ones that I want to talk to. 8 years ago, I sat in this very same studio, and I looked at you and I said, I am not going to be a candidate. I'm not going to be an elected official that makes promises. I'm a candidate that makes a commitment. That makes a commitment not to be like all the politicians that we see in Washington and we see in Albany. Politicians who just look out for their own personal advancement. I've made decisions in this council for the past 8 years that have been controversial, but in the end, they end up being the right decisions. I don't take pension smoothing plans that my opponents have said that they would have taken because it would have been the easy road out. These are plans that past councils have done, and all it does is kick the can down the road. But what they don't understand is that you're the can being kicked. I will continue for another 4 years of being the voice, your voice, on the city council. I will continue to end fees. For the last 8 years in office, I've cut over $100,000 worth of fees. For the last couple of years, I have questioned every single spending item. I've proposed cuts. I've proposed, Mr. DeAngelis mentions that I haven't brought up any of these proposals. Well, that's just not true. Okay, 6 years being a minority, budget after budget, I've proposed cuts, but I've also proposed an alternative. We can't get out of this alone by just cutting. We need to be aggressive. We need to generate more revenues. But the difference between me and the other candidates, you're not the only revenue source. I will tirelessly work to benefit this community. Please vote for me on November 5th.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. We'll now hear from Chris DeAngelis, who is on the Republican and Independent line. Mr. DeAngelis.
Thank you, Guy. And once again, thanks to everyone involved for putting this forum together and allowing us an opportunity to share our thoughts with the people of the city of Auburn. Once again, at this juncture, I'm compelled to take just a brief moment in my closing remarks to point out that Councilor Smith is continually trying to tell you what I'm thinking or what other people sitting here are thinking. It's unfortunate. We have a group of people sitting on the council currently. They've done their best. They've brought us to this point. The financial health of the city of Auburn is in critical condition. Something needs to be done about it. We need to get serious about that problem. We need to start making smart decisions to move us in the right direction. I believe that I have the experience to help the city move in that direction. I certainly have the knowledge to look at these issues and, based on my experience, make some of the right decisions that need to be made to help us move in a positive direction. I'm asking you, the people of the city of Auburn, for your vote. It's my hope that we can do whatever is necessary to get our financial health in order, because everything that the city provides in terms of services depends on our good financial health. So thank you for tuning in and listening, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. We'll finally hear from Debbie McCormick, who is on the Democratic Working Families Party and Auburn First Party.
Thank you. Thank you again. I skipped the Cayuga Community College staff that are doing a great job. It's really still warm in here, though. You promised me it wouldn't be. Anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to voters. We've had a great array of different opportunities through the newspaper, through Ignite, and it really is a great service to the voters of Auburn to get to know everybody the way that we've been able to do this. The reason I'm here today, is that I've been watching City Council from the City Clerk's seat for 13 years. I've seen it done. I've seen how council can be done, how City Council can be run, and I've seen how it shouldn't be done. In the last 8 years, my opponents have had the opportunity to do the right thing, to make the city successful, and they've had 8 years to do it, and here we are today. We're in a big financial mess. We've got bad relationships with surrounding towns. The school district's not too happy with us. We've got to mend the fences. We've got to talk to people. We have to work together with the people in the surrounding towns and our school district and other organizations that we need as much as they need us. We don't live in a different country. We live in Cayuga County. All of us do. And we need to start thinking about ourselves as a county, as a region, and not as us and them. We need to stop cutting services. We need to start making smart decisions. We need to start listening to experts, following best practices, using common sense. We need to start doing things differently than have been done in the last 8 years. And that's why I'm running for City Council. I hope to get your support on November 5th. I appreciate your time tonight. And again, don't forget to vote. Row A all the way.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. I'd like to thank all of you again for your time over the last 90 minutes. We also want to thank Mr. Boyer for his questions over the hour-and-a-half forum.
Thank you.
Also want to thank Michael, our timekeeper, for this. We also, more importantly, want to thank all of you for tuning in for the last hour-and-a-half to listen to the candidates and hear their thoughts and ideas as they move forward in the last week of the campaign. This will be rebroadcast again on Thursday night here on both on channels 12 and 98 for Time Warner. It'll also be on FiOS 31 on Saturday with the Time Warner channels on ARMA, both on Saturday and Sunday starting at 5:30. You'll be able to download this show on auburnpub.com. The Citizen, because of the number of forums we've done, this is number 5, has put them on their website. You'll be able to watch this right after it runs on Time Warner tonight. We return next week with our regularly scheduled programming. We'll have 2 Beyond the Front Pages, the first dealing with the E. John Gavrer Center that is celebrating its 65th year, and the other on the Harriet Tubman Symposium that is being held here at Cayuga Community College as the community remembers the 100th anniversary of Harriet Tubman's passing away. As always, we'd like to have your ideas and your questions about what guests you'd like to have on. You can contact us at cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Remind you to go out and vote. Have a good night and have a great tomorrow.